Hey, my name's Evan McCaddy, and today we are jumping into the downsides of private label products. We're going to be going over the lack of customization, the lower margins, the highly competitive nature, and some of the difficulties with dealing with quality control. I'll also be giving you some tips on how to combat some of these downsides too. For those that don't know, a private label product is an existing product that's already been designed, it's already been developed, and is currently being manufactured. You can take this existing product and slap your brand's logo on it and put it in some custom packaging. Private label products are a very inexpensive way to get a product into the market and start building out a brand. It's also a very fast way to capitalize on new consumer trends or gaps that you find in the market. It can take as little as 2 months to get from your initial idea phase to having your brand and inventory in a warehouse stateside. Seeing as private label products are one of the fastest and least expensive ways to start building out a brand, you'll often see entrepreneurs that have found some kind of success with Amazon FBA or even drop shipping start to pivot into private label products because of their growth potential. Actually having your branding on your physical product and packaging makes it a lot easier to stand out from your competition, and it really opens up your options for building out new product lines, building your overall brand awareness. So overall, having branded products definitely increases the value of your business. Before we get into the downsides, I want to acknowledge that many people have made a good chunk of coin with private label business models. I have personally built out brands around private label products, and over the years, I've helped many people find and customize and deal with the logistics of private label products. Even though I've dealt with a lot of these types of products, I would not consider myself a private label guru or that I've cracked the secret formula of finding winning products or anything like that. There's lots of great tutorials out there on picking good products and setting up your Shopify store, getting Facebook ads up and running, etc., etc. In this video, we're just focusing on the product side of things. Obviously, there are hundreds of other variables that are contributing to the success or failure of a private label business model. I've even seen some people pull off some huge wins by getting really creative with the e-commerce side of things with a total dud of a product. That's not common, but it does happen. Right now, we're just focusing on the backbone of your business, the physical product. Let's get to it. Point number one, a lack of customization. With private label products, usually what you see is what you get. Yes, of course, you are adding your logo on the product and on the packaging, but outside of that, you're usually not making any changes to the product that tangibly increases its value. You might be able to pick between a few different color options or maybe a couple different variants, but other than that, you're kind of out of luck. Because of the lack of this kind of customization, you're sort of limited to your ability to really stand out and dominate in your niche. Most private label sellers that I talk to eventually hit this roadblock as they scale, and they will eventually transition into an ODM product. So let me explain why a lot of private label sellers are essentially leaving money on the table by not improving their products. So we probably all agree that you should never sell in a niche that you don't completely understand. If you're considering launching a private label product, you should have a damn good understanding of exactly what your target audience wants. You should be scraping keyword search volumes. You should be combing Amazon reviews to figure out pain points and product shortcomings. You should be running Facebook ad tests to get some good real world data. So by the end of your research phase, you should have a complete and total understanding of the product and the customer experience. So by that point, you should know what can be done to improve the product and make it better. And that's where you kind of get stuck with private label products. For example, let's say that you discovered that clients would happily pay 25% more for a unit with USB-C, and no one else is doing that. Okay, well, that will require a new supply chain and new PCB design. It's probably not going to happen. Or let's say you notice improvements that can be made to the plastic injection housing. The mold's already been made, and they're probably not making any modifications to the mold for, a 500 unit order. Private label products just aren't set up to be modified like that. Also, going through your Alibaba contact or sourcing agent to try and make contact with the actual factories and somehow get your input through the engineers and convince the factory owners to make the changes, it's a really big uphill battle, and there's a good amount of risk involved in it as well. There are ways to do it, but making changes to a product like this is what we call a modified private label product. It's essentially a mix between a totally custom ODM product that you are developing from scratch and an off-the-shelf private label product where you're just slapping your logo on. Yeah, you mix them. So you get the benefit of speed and lower upfront costs that you would usually find with private label products with the customization and higher value product that you get from the ODM side of things. Things here get a little bit tricky with protecting your IP and managing your supply chains, but I've seen a lot of products really benefit from this kind of method that you can't really do through your traditional sourcing agent. Okay, let's get into downside number 2. So you're gonna have higher costs and lower margins. So yes, private label products have much better margins than drop shipping products. However, it's seeing a 100 to 200% markup for private label products on Alibaba is not uncommon. Keeping your per unit cost down is one of the easiest ways to keep your margins nice and high. Now, the reason why people are willing to pay such high prices for private label products is because of the convenience and low upfront cost. Somebody else has already made that investment in developing and setting up manufacturing, and now you're essentially paying them for those services. This is kind of a bird's eye view of why you pay so much more for a private label product, but if we zoom in a bit, we can see where a lot of the extra cost is coming from. So let's pretend that your product is a desk lamp. It's probably got something like 10 components in it. You've got LEDs, you've got the PCB, you've got wiring, housing, etc. So first off, let's clear something up. There is no lamp factory. Lamp factories don't exist. And by this, I mean that there's no single factory that manufactures the entire lamp. Each component is manufactured in a specialized component factory, and those components get bought and sold along the way before reaching whoever it is you're buying it from. So these components need to pass through so many different hands before final assembly, and every time a component changes hands, it gets marked up in price. So let's say the actual cost of an LED diode is 5 cents, and it has to pass through 5 different sets of hands before it gets to you. Each time it's getting marked up by about 20%. So if you purchase the final product, that 5-cent LED might be marked up as much as $1. Now, when you multiply this out across all of the different components in your product, suddenly you're paying some pretty steep margins. The easiest way to combat these steep markups is by negotiating with every single component factory. It's not as hard as it sounds, but it's pretty difficult to do with private label products. So let's go over the basic way to negotiate these prices down. You should be trying to get your hands on the BOM. This is the bill of materials. This is one of the most useful tools in negotiating prices with factories. This document lists out the cost of every single component or product. Everything from raw material cost to that single LED to every screw, nut, or bolt that goes into the product. It all gets priced out. Even the cost of labor to assemble the product is listed on the BOM. Now, with this information, you can go through every single component and figure out how much margin is each factory is actually adding. Now, obviously, we want everyone that we're doing business with, including our factories, to be making money, but we want to make sure that we're not getting hosed on any particular component. We can always sit down with them and renegotiate on a component by component basis, or we can find alternative supply chains to get better pricing if they don't want to play ball. So with private label products, you're not paying for molds, you're not paying for tooling, you're not paying for development, and for some products that accounts for huge savings, but still it's well worth breaking down the individual component costs to see what kind of margins are getting tacked onto your product. Usually suppliers that are selling private label products will not be giving out their BOM, so the only real way to get better pricing is with higher volume orders. Okay, point number 3, high competition. There's not much barrier of entry, and what is there is low enough for most of your competition to step over. Other than having enough capital to hit your supplier's MOQ, there really isn't much stopping anyone from directly competing with you on the exact same product. So let's pretend you really did strike out. You hit the jackpot on finding that winning product. You've probably got like a 3 to 4 month window of opportunity before the vultures come in and flood the market. Anyone can find your supplier and slap their own logo on it too. Maybe you've got a lot of confidence because you found the supplier on the 22nd page of Alibaba and their listing looked terrible, but you know that their product is great. If your product is a success, I guarantee that people will find your supplier and you will have direct competition on the exact same product. Using less popular or smaller suppliers does have a few benefits, but it also carries a lot more risk and it can be much harder to scale. So if someone is selling the exact same product as you, it quickly turns into a race to the bottom for price, or in the short term, whoever has the prettiest packaging. Of course, this low barrier of entry makes it easy for you to dip your toes into the pool of entrepreneurship. So you could argue this to be a pro, but in my experience, it can quickly turn into a con, especially once you start scaling. Okay, last point, quality control. It's difficult to manage. Let's go back to that lamp example. So out of those 10 components, now you've got 10 pretty big variables that you don't have much control over. all of your communication begins and ends with your Alibaba supplier, and your Alibaba supplier probably doesn't have the connections to every single one of the factories manufacturing the components that go into the lamp. So when a new batch lands at your warehouse for inspection and there's issues, or heaven forbid, you start getting returns, bad reviews due to product failure or defects, your only real recourse is to complain to your sourcing agent. Okay, now what if that issue is with a component that your supplier is 2 or 3 steps removed from? It makes it really difficult for them to backtrack through the supply chain and solve what the problem is actually coming from, where it's actually occurring, and it's unlikely that you'll be able to do that either. Any quality control issues that need to pass through multiple people before they reach the factory or vendor responsible for the issue. So sometimes you'll be able to get the QC issue resolved, but it's really out of your hands and you don't have much control over the process. The best way to combat this is by either having a really strong relationship with your supplier and having an independent QC team on the ground in the factories to check everything before you pay the final balance on your order. This is the best way to protect yourself with private label products. It doesn't fix the QC issues, it just puts everything on pause. Okay, now I know I've just thrown a lot of shade at private label products, but it's not all bad. I know many people personally that have hit some great wins with private label products. They can be highly profitable and a really quick way to get up and running with business. If you work with the right people on the ground, you can pull off some really creative stuff, as I mentioned, with modified private label products, or you could really lean on off-the-shelf components when designing and building out a custom ODM product to cut your development costs way down. More on this in future videos. In summary, private label products are a great way to jump into the game and start building your business and building your brand. I've seen a lot of really sharp entrepreneurs start off with private label products to, build their capital and learn and figure things out, and then use that to springboard themselves into a totally custom ODM product with bigger margins and a better product and much higher growth potential by using and applying everything they learned from their private label product. Okay, if you've got any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below or shoot me a message using the link in the description. I will get back to each and every one of you. Cheers.